Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to another installment of Analyzing the Address, where we take a closer look at the day's khutbah, talk about it in a little bit additional detail, provide some additional context and content that we weren't able to provide given the time constraints of the khutbah, and also offer you the opportunity, if you so choose, to ask questions and to provide feedback on the khutbah. And today's khutbah was a continuation of a series that we started a few weeks back, in which we've been commenting on some very important verses from Surah Al-Hujurat, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the subject of achieving Muslim unity and fostering a cohesive Muslim community. And at the outset of every khutbah, we give this little introduction where we mention how in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He counsels us on interpersonal relations and warns us against words and deeds which sow division and cause the believers who should love one another to despise one another instead. And I just want to revisit quickly some of the examples of those words and deeds that cause or can sow division and cause the believers to despise one another when they should love one another. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this surah, He prohibits speaking or acting without first verifying reports. Because when we do that, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that we may harm some people who don't deserve to be harmed. And then after we come to realize that we made a rash decision, we acted impulsively and erroneously, then we will be what? We will be required to repent and make amends for the wrong that we've done to these people. Another thing the law prohibits is conflict between believers. He also prohibits injustice. He also prohibits mocking the believers, insulting the believers, calling the believers by offensive nicknames, spying on other believers, backbiting other believers. These are just some of the examples of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits because they can sow discord, sow division, and cause the believers who should love one another to despise each other instead. And if you take these examples from Surah Al-Hujurat and couple them with the examples throughout the Quran and throughout the Sunnah of things that Allah and His Messenger have prohibited because they sow division amongst the believers, and at the same time, those things which Allah and His Messenger have encouraged us to do because they bring us closer together and foster unity and a cohesive Muslim community. We bring all that together, you'll see what Ibn Rajab mentioned in Jami'. You'll see that our religion tells us basically, as Muslims, to do everything that will bring us together and to avoid everything that will sow division and rip us apart. Ibn Rajab, he says it in this way. He says, فَإِذَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً أُمِرُوا فِي مَا بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا يُوجِبُ التَّآلُفِ الْقُلُوبِ وَاجْتِمَاعَهَا وَنُهُوا عَمَّا يُوجِبُ تَنَافُرُ الْقُلُوبِ وَاخْتِلَافَهَا. He says, so since the believers are brothers, then they have been commanded with that which will lead to harmony and unite the hearts. Likewise, they have been prohibited from whatever leads to mutual aversion, disagreement, dissension, conflict, and discord. So basically, Surah Al-Hujurat is giving us a general principle. Yes, Allah mentions specific examples, but the general principle behind those examples is, O believer, avoid everything that can create and sow division between you and your fellow believers. ثم بعد ذلك, as is the case in every khutbah in this series, we selected one ayah or a set of ayat in one context relating to one of those words or deeds that we've been discouraged from engaging in because it sows division. And in this particular ayah, we chose in this particular khutbah, we chose the ayah number 13, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, inna khalaqanakum, Ya ayyuha nasu, inna khalaqanakum من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. O mankind, we have created you from a single male and a single female and made you nations and tribes to know one another. Indeed, the noblest of you with Allah is the most God-fearing and God-conscious. Verily, Allah is all-knowing, well aware. And then we mentioned at the outset of explaining these verses, we said, brothers and sisters, all too often, when we look at each other, when we see each other, we see physical differences. Differences in skin color, differences in nationality, language, culture, clothing, etc. We see these physical differences. And what we do is, to expand on that point, is we have a tendency to focus on the wrong things, basically. The general message from that opening statement is that we have a tendency as believers, dealing with other believers, we have a tendency to focus on the wrong things. We focus on what makes us different, the apparent differences between ourselves and others, right? Whether it be the clothing that they wear. Oh, this guy dresses funny, right? And this person looks different. He looks funny, right? Look, his eyes are different, right? His hair is different. His skin tone is different. He talks funny. You know, I don't understand what the person is saying, and the way, the intonations and the different, I don't understand where a word begins and a word ends. The person talks funny, etc. This is what we have a tendency to do. Okay? And all of this is what? It's wrong. And why do we say it's wrong? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't look at these things and doesn't value these things and doesn't use these things to assign value to people. As the Prophet taught us in the hadith, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرْ إِلَىٰ أَجْسَادِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَىٰ أَمْوَالِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرْ إِلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. He said, Allah does not look at your outward appearances or your wealth. Rather, He looks at your hearts and your deeds. Allah is not concerned with what? The zahir, the outside. Partly because, and we're going to come to this, because we can't control that. He created us and He made what? Our outsides. So He's not going to hold us accountable for something that's beyond our control. But He is going to hold us accountable for what? What's in our hearts and the actions that we perform, the deeds that we do. And so if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't consider this the standard, the correct unit of measurement, the way to measure a man or a woman and to determine their value, we shouldn't do that either. Why? لِلَّهِ الْمَثْلُ الْأَعْلَى. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sets the standard that should be emulated by His creatures. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the finest qualities, the finest names, and the most beautiful and excellent attributes. And whenever He has an attribute that we can emulate, like in this case, setting value for certain things, if He does something that we're able to do in our own limited human scope, we're supposed to do as Allah does within our own limited scope. Why? Because whatever Allah does, whatever attribute He has is what? Al-Mathalul A'la. It is the highest similitude. It's the best. So He's setting the example for us in our own human context. And that's why you find a hadith where the Prophet teaches us in a roundabout way to what? To emulate these attributes as we can in accordance with what? Our particular human scope or ability. So for example, you have the Prophet saying, Inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbu al-jamal. Allah is beautiful and He loves when you beautify yourselves. The hadith where He said, Inna Allaha rafiqun yuhibbu al-rifq. Allah is gentle and He loves it when you are gentle. He loves it. He loves that you would be gentle, right? إِنَّمَا يَرْحَمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الرُّحَمَاء. Allah is only merciful to those of His servants who show what? Mercy to others. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ فِي عَوْنِ الْعَبْدِ مَا كَانَ الْعَبْدُ فِي عَوْنِ أَخِيهِ. Allah will continue to help His servant as long as His servant continues to help his brother. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a quality that we're able to emulate, we're supposed to emulate that. And this is a quality we can certainly emulate. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't look at the zahir, doesn't look at the apparent things, the physical differences. He looks beyond that. Looks at what? What's in the heart and looks at what? The deeds, right? And in our case, we can't see what's in the heart, but we can see what? What the reflection of what's in the heart, which is the deeds, how people behave, their character, and their decorum, and how they comport themselves. And then we went on the khutbah and we said, instead of focusing on what unites us, Islam and Iman, we have a tendency to focus on these differences and allow them to divide us. And the result of this, brothers and sisters, this overemphasis and misplaced focus on the exterior is that we become divided instead of united, which is the opposite of what Allah and His Messenger have mandated. Allah said one of the reasons why Allah and His Messenger don't tell us to look at the outside, because we're going to start noticing all these differences, and those differences are going to what? They're going to drive a wedge between us. Allah and His Messenger don't want the believers to be divided. Doesn't want a wedge to be driven between them. He wants us to be united. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for example, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. He says, hold fast all together, O believers, to the rope of Allah, and be not divided amongst yourselves. He doesn't want us to be divided. The Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we read last week in Surah Al-Hujurat, where Allah says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. The believers are nothing less than a single brotherhood, so reconcile between your brothers who are at odds and fear Allah, so that you may receive mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that we're brothers. We're supposed to be what? A brotherhood and a sisterhood. And He says, فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. Reconcile between your brothers. Why? So you'll be united and not divided. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, Al-Muslim akhul Muslim. He said, a Muslim is the brother of his fellow Muslim. Again, wants us to be united. And he said, وَكُونُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا. He said, and be, O servants of Allah, brothers to one another. So again, all of these, and we could go on and on, all of these textual proofs teach us one thing. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger want us to be what? Want us to be united. Right? And all this focus on the exterior, what? It undermines that. It causes us to be what? Divided. Because we're focusing on things which are what? We're focusing on the differences and the things that make us different, instead of focusing on the things that we have in common, the shared things, and Iman wal Islam. And then we went on and we said, until these differences become the primary, perhaps the only yardstick by which another man or woman is measured, the only scale by which their worth is weighed and determined. Okay? And this is important because, again, it shows us, or it kind of highlights our present reality and why we are where we are as an ummah. Why we're so disjointed. Because again, we've allowed ourselves to focus so much on the exterior, so much on the physical, particularly the physical differences, that we have allowed those differences to become the primary, if not the only, measurement of a man or a woman. And the only determining factor between who's, in our mind, who's good and bad, who is valued and devalued, who is going to be respected and disrespected, friend or foe, loved and hated, etc. That's become it. And I want to give a personal example of this that will just really drive the point home and show us how far we are from where we need to be. When I was studying in a particular country that will remain nameless, and I first arrived obviously without family. And I had a friend who was particularly influential and had helped other Americans get their families or make it possible for their families to join them in their studies. And obviously it was going to be very difficult for me to study for 2 years in the language program and then 4 years in the faculty without my family, with my family all the way back in the States. It's very difficult. And so obviously I wanted to do everything I could to get my family to join me. And so this friend and I had some discussions, and he told me that it's pretty much it's a formality. You know, this is not a big deal. You're an American, and the president of the university will allow you to bring your family. You just have to go and meet with him, and you explain your situation, and you give him a letter, a formal letter requesting what they call Iscv, which is basically the ability to bring your family, and you'll be allowed to bring your family. No issue whatsoever. It's pretty much the meeting's a formality, and many brothers have gone before you. I've gone with them. I've assisted them in the process, etc. So he assured me everything was going to be fine. So there was a particular day where we're supposed to go and meet with him. And I remember seeing my friend earlier that day, before, like, we're going to meet after classes were over in the afternoon. And I met with him in the morning, and I was wearing this, I'm very fond of, I was at that time and still am, very fond of what they call the shalwar qamis, which is commonly worn by like people from the Indo-Pak subcontinent. That two-piece long shirt with balloon pants. Very fond. I had a very nice one that I was very fond of, liked to wear it. And one of the nicer pieces that I had, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to wear this to meet with him because it's one of the nicer garments that I have. And so when I met with my friend in the morning, he said to me, he said, "You're not going to wear that, are you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to wear it. It's like one of the best things I have, because I'm going to go meet the mudir, the president of the university." He's like, no, I don't think you should meet that. I don't think you should wear that when you meet him. I don't think he'll like that. He won't appreciate that. And he may not honor your request if you're wearing that. And I was like, and this is one of my problems, one of my failings, unfortunately. It's one of those dual-edged swords. It's like something, it's a good quality from one angle and a bad quality from another angle. I am a religious idealist. And I'm quite naive in this regard, in the sense that I just expect every Muslim to do the Muslim thing and to behave the way a Muslim is supposed to behave. And so when my friend said to me that, he's not gonna look fondly on you wearing that, and he may not honor your request, I was like, why would he do that? Why would he care what I'm wearing? He should be more concerned about, my grades. Am I a good student? Am I going to be able to have a family and, maintain my commitment to my studies, etc. And am I going to be able to be financially, capable of supporting them? That's what he should be concerned about. What I'm wearing, that shouldn't matter. So my friend was like, "I'm just telling you, you really shouldn't wear that." And I just brushed him off, and I wore it anyway. I didn't listen. Again, religious idealist and very naive. So we go. And sure enough, when I met with the mudir, and he saw me and he laid eyes on me in this garment that I was wearing, he had this expression on his face like a person who smelled garbage. Yes, it was awful. It was immediate and so recognizable. And I wanted to sink into my chair because I realized what my friend had said was 100% true. And then on top of that, he asked me, he said, "I thought you were American. Are you Pakistani?" He said, "Are you like originally Pakistani and then like you went to America and got citizenship or something?" I was like, "No, I just like these clothes. I was born and raised in America. I just like these clothes." Al-Muhim, he said, "Okay, sanando fi mawdu'ik," and he kind of fanned me. Like, we'll look into your request and you can go. That's basically what happened. And ultimately, I didn't get it. I didn't get it at first. In fact, it was a long back and forth throughout that whole semester until I actually had to seek help from someone who was above him. And that someone who was above him kind of, pressured him to allow me to bring my family. But I say all this to say that experience taught me it was a practical lesson I had to learn of where we are as Muslims. Even though you're in a place which you consider to be very holy, and you're with people who you think are going to be highly committed, you come to realize that many of us have fallen into this trap, the trap of shaitan, of focusing too much on the exterior and putting too much weight on how people look and the clothes that they wear, and developing an opinion about people and treating them a certain way based upon what? That exterior. And so this is a practical example that I experienced of that happening. And it's one of many, actually. Al-Muhim, to summarize this particular part of the talk, these differences in physical appearance or culture or language or where people come from, their nationality, etc., these differences cause us to deem ourselves superior to and to look down upon those who are different in a bad way. In a bad way generally? Is it something bad that they're doing or something bad about them? No, bad from our own ethnocentric vantage points, our own ethnocentric perspectives. And this is the exact opposite of what Allah intended by making us different. We are doing exactly what Allah doesn't want us to do. Allah doesn't want us to treat each other differently or to be averse towards each other, to be repulsed by each other because we're different. That's not what Allah wants. Allah says in the Quran, لِتَعَارَفُوا, or in this ayah He says, لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you would know one another. Al-Baghawi explained, he said, لِيَعْرِفَ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا فِي قُرْبِ النَّسَبِ وَبُعْدِهِ. He says, so that each one of you would know each other in terms of your close relatives and your distant relatives, لَا لِيَتَفَاخَرُوا, not so that some of you would hold others in contempt and look down upon others because they are different. This is the exact opposite, and this is what we're doing, which should teach us something. That at some point we have to nudrik anfusana. At some point we have to take a step back and say, what are we doing with this Islam that we've been blessed with? Islam is here and we're over here. Something is wrong. We need to come what? We need to come to Islam and be Muslims in the real sense of the word. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu udkhulu fis silmi kafa. Oh, you who believe, enter into Islam completely. Be real Muslims in the real sense of the word Islam, and not Muslims in name only, or Muslims in some things and not Muslims in other things. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك, we went on to mention how the Prophet ﷺ, not only is this the opposite of what Allah is telling us to do in the Quran in this ayah, it's also the Prophet ﷺ called this overemphasis on the exterior, overemphasis on these physical differences which are beyond our control, which we're going to talk about shortly. Not only is that something Allah says is wrong, the Prophet called it jahiliyyah. He called it ignorance. And there are four things that we benefit from the Prophet calling it ignorance. At least four things. One, that it represents everything that is bad about human existence. Everything that's bad about us as humans and how we get on and how we behave is represented in what al-jahiliyyah. So when the Prophet calls something jahiliyyah, it means what? It's from everything that's bad about humans. Number two, it's the antithesis of Islam. It's the opposite of what Islam is. Which is supported by number three, Islam came to eradicate and abolish al-jahiliyyah. So Islam opposes everything which is jahili, everything which is ignorant or from the pre-Islam period of ignorance. The point that the Prophet said in Khutbah al-Wada', he said in his parting address, the last khutbah that he gave during Hajj, he said, "Kullu amrin min umur al-jahiliyyah tahta qadami mawdu'a." Mawdu'a. He said, every matter from the matters of jahiliyyah, all these matters of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance is under my feet. I've come to what? To abolish it, to eradicate it. And last but not least from the four that I wanted to mention, is it's one of the strongest indications of a tahreem, prohibition, illegality, and sin. Whenever Allah and or His Messenger describe something as from jahiliyyah, it's one of the strongest indications that that thing is prohibited. So when the Prophet says that all this racial prejudice, all this color prejudice, all this nationalism, all of this this culture prejudice, all of this is from jahiliyyah. It's telling you that that is haram. It's haram for a Muslim to measure another Muslim because of these things, and to mistreat them or treat them differently because of these things, but we do it all the time. It happens all the time. And then we closed the khutbah by saying, so what should be the factor that determines another man or woman's worth? if we say that these physical differences, these exterior issues, the apparent things are not the thing, not the factor, not the measure, unit of measure, what should it be? How should we determine who is good or bad? Who is entitled to respect or disrespect? Who ought to be loved and who ought to be despised? How should we be determining that? And we said it's not the outside that none of us can control. None of us can control the outside. None of us can control the color of our skin, what we look like, the place we were born. You can't control that. You don't get to pick that. None of us can control the language that we learned as we were growing up. None of us can control the cultural influences that make you, you, and me, and him, and her. We can't control these things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want a person to be burdened with trying to control something that they can't control. Allah doesn't do that. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not place on a soul a burden greater than what it can bear. And He doesn't want us as human beings to do that. To burden a person beyond what they can bear. To blame a person. And to hold a person accountable. To punish a person because of their language. Because of the color of their skin. Because of the size of their nose. Because of the straightness or the kinkiness of their hair. Because of the clothes that they're accustomed to wearing because that's what they grew up wearing. The foods that they like to eat because that's what they grew up eating. Allah doesn't want us to punish each other for that and to treat each other differently for that, but that's what we do. And so we went on to say Allah doesn't want us to be concerned or to make the yardstick these things that we can't control. The outside things we can't control, but rather He wants us to make the factor, the measure, the unit of measurement, the inside things that we can control. Not the color of a person's skin, the content of their character. And here, I want to close by saying this. It's important for us as believers to look around our circle. Look at the people that we have taken as friends, particularly our close friends. And ask ourselves sincerely, why? Why this person and not that person? Why is this person my friend? Are they my friend because of how religious they are? And is this person not my friend because of how irreligious they are? Quite often, brothers and sisters, it's the opposite. This person is my friend in spite of their lack of commitment. Despite the fact that they're irreligious, they're still my friend. And this person is not my friend because of their religion, because of their commitment. And that's wrong. To the point that I know some people, a particular person in particular, but I know some people like this, who are very committed. They're what we call Ashab al-Masajid or Ahl al-Masjid. They're the people who frequent the mosque. They're the people who they try to do the religious things. They try to make dhikr. They try to dress Islamically as much as they can, to appear Islamically in terms of for a man growing a beard. And when they're with other Muslims, they like to talk about religious things. They like to remember Allah. They like to be reminded of Allah and to remind other people of Allah. They like to give nasiha, which is a part of the deen, an important part of the deen, to the point the Prophet called it the deen. Ad-din nasiha. Religion is being sincere and advising sincerely. The Prophet made it synonymous with the deen. So they like to do that. So if they see something, they'll say something. And they'll say it respectfully and nicely. But they're just trying to give nasiha and help others to do good. Encourage others to do good. Those people, I know some of them, they'll tell you on your face, I have no friends. And I don't think people like me. They are the people when they come to the masjid, and there are other people who come to the masjid too, but they won't associate with them. They'll say hi and bye, salam, kif halik, and then keep moving. They're not the people who get invited to people's homes for dinner. They're not the people who get invited to weddings and other events and occasions. They don't. They're not the people want to take as friends. They want to take people as friends who won't remind them of Allah. If they do something wrong, they won't say anything. They'll be quiet. They'll quietly go along with it, or at least, turn a blind eye. That's unfortunate, brothers and sisters, and that's what? That's upside down. That's the opposite of what we should be doing. The Prophet ﷺ said in one hadith, he said, مَثَلُ الْجَلِيسَ الصَّالِحِ وَجَلِيسُ السُّوءِ كَمَثَلِ حَامِلِ الْمِسْكِ وَنَافِخِ الْكِيرِ. He said, the likeness of the righteous companion and the wicked companion is the likeness of the musk merchant and the iron smith. The musk merchant, any way you slice it, good will come to you from him. Maybe he will give you a free sample of what he's selling. Or he will sell you some of the perfume. Or at the very least, you will leave his company with what? With a good smell. Because he's a seller of perfume. You'll smell like perfume when you leave. So any way you slice it, good will come to you from him. And that's the religious person. What bad can come to you? He won't lie to you. He won't steal from you. He'll advise you. He'll give you the gift of your fault. As Umar used to say, رَحِمَ اللَّهُ امْرَأً أَهْدَى إِلَيَّ عُيُوبِي. May Allah have mercy upon the person who gives me my faults as a gift. That means what? I can correct it in this world and meet Allah with one less sin. Nothing but good can come to you from him, and people could treat him like what? Like he's a scourge, like he's a pariah, like he is, a leper. Get away from him. Get away from the religious person. On the other hand, Al-Jalis As-Su, the bad guy, the wicked companion, is like Nafakh al-Kir. He's like the ironsmith, which means any way you slice it, bad is going to come to you from him. Either you're going to go into his company and he's going to burn one of those sparks, is going to come off one of the pieces of iron that he's hammering to shape it, and it's going to come onto your clothing and burn your clothes. Or your clothes will be covered in what? In soot. The soot from the iron, from the oven. Or at the very least, you'll leave him with what? With a bad smell. So we have companions who we associate with, and they don't help us in good. They maybe even help us in evil. When we want to do good, they discourage us. And we continue to associate with them because what? We have things upside down. We're measuring people the wrong way. And we need to stop doing that. And that's one of the messages of this ayah. That we have to learn how to measure people the right way. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honored of you in the sight of Allah is the one who is most God-conscious, God-fearing. These are the people that we want to have more of them in our life, and we want to be from them. We want to try to be like them. And so this is basically a synopsis or a summary with some additional commentary on the khutbah. And we'll leave it there, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it, as always, to bless your houses, your spouses, your children, your families, to bless you, to bless your health, your wealth, and make you blessed wherever you may be. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who He teaches beneficial knowledge, and who He benefits from that knowledge by making us from those who put it into practice. Until we meet again, هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.